the first LandViewer National Crop Forecasting webinar of the season. There will at least be 3 or 4 of these webinars throughout the growing season now that corn has emerged. And want to start out by introducing our team. For those of you who are new to this, it's Ken Copenhaver. He's our satellite expert, and he processes and accesses the satellite data and puts together the geospatial mapping tools. That's myself, and Jonathan Fleck is our statistician in charge of the modeling, and Randy Darvis, Solright Consultant, is our on-the-ground expert, and he also coordinates a team of 12 soil consultants throughout the Midwest that have provided substantial input to our assessments. If there's any questions, please use the space provided on the side panel as outlined here, the question section. Ask any question you want, and at the end of the webinar, we want to try to answer as many as possible. I want to start by looking at how we did last year. Obviously, there are 2 components to our forecasting: acreage, which is mostly based on satellite regression, and Ken will go into this in a little bit more detail, acreage forecast, and then yield forecast. Inherently, there's higher uncertainties associated with yield forecast. Acres forecast, since we're using satellite image has a higher accuracy. And with that, we can review how we did last year. Basically, each of these 1 through 10 are individual corn draw areas. Although last year, in general, acreage was up, most of our plants were actually located in areas where there was less acreage planted to corn. And as you can see, we're able to predict this very accurately about 7 months before USDA released the 2013 acreage numbers on a county-by-county level basis, which was just released in February of this year. So we have high accuracy forecasting acreage using satellite data. We rely very heavily on ground truthing, our soil consultants. It's very important, especially during this early times of crop development, but also throughout the whole season. We do multiple trips throughout the U.S., throughout the Corn Belt, and that effort is headed by Randy Darr. And again, as I mentioned, has put together a team of consultants. And Randy, why don't you start by giving us a little overview of what you see out across the Corn Belt?
All righty. We just got back last night from our initial crop tour of the Corn Belt. Traveled over 2,600 miles in 4.5 days, looking at the corn crop across the area. And it, in basic terms, the corn crop looks excellent. It is in much better condition than a year ago at this time. We know last year there was corn that had just been planted at this point in time. But looking at our map here, I've assembled the consultant colleagues from around the country that give us reports each week, and they describe what they're seeing in their specific areas. And as you look at that picture, everything is good to excellent. There is areas slightly north of, say, Rochester, Minnesota, across to Fargo, North Dakota, that is wetter than the other areas in general. The crop is there. It looks good. There are some localized wet areas. May not be significant at this time as to damage of the crop, but there are a few concerns there, but at this point in time it is markedly better than a year ago. Basically, the 2 major corn producers of Iowa and Illinois look absolutely spectacular. Illinois probably being a little ahead of Iowa as a rule. Corn here in the southern or in south central part of Illinois is going to begin tasseling here shortly. Probably next week we'll start seeing that, and that progress will keep going north as in the coming weeks. As you get into over in Indiana and Ohio, that their crops are a little bit farther behind than the Illinois crop is, but it still looks good and it's on pace to be at least near normal. There are some localized wet areas in western Ohio and across into eastern Indiana, but it's not of any consequence at this time. But as you look at this next slide, you can see kind of the latest report from our guys. Gives a little more detail. If you look at their report each week that comes out, that it'll be a little more detailed than just these bullet points. So that'll give you a good idea of what the crop looks like. But at this time, I think we have a very good crop, potentially one of the best ever as a rule over the Corn Belt. So,
hey Randy, can you just say a couple things about the beans as well, since we have some elevator operators on the line?
Sure. As far as the soybean crop, it's not as good currently as the corn crop because the beans, obviously are planted a little later, and then the wet pattern started towards the end of May. So bean planting was a little bit touch and go there for a while. I think most of the beans are planted, but they've got a long ways to go. They aren't handling the wet weather as well as the corn is, but the corn is bigger and has a bigger root structure under it currently, so it can handle a little more wet weather than the beans can. Guys are having trouble getting post applications of herbicides applied, and it's been kind of a struggle trying to get these fields clean so that they can go ahead and grow, just because the ground's so wet they can't travel across the ground. So potentially, if this wet weather continues, we could see some aerial applications of herbicides at some point, but it's still early enough that probably won't be gone to right away. So the bean crop looks like it's there, but we need it to dry up.
Yeah, excellent. So in this picture, basically, what we have developed with Randy is we're posting all the pictures that he takes on his crop to online, and I can send interested parties the link to it, but you can click on those individual orange dots, and it basically shows them the pictures for these dots for these locations. And I will, at the end of this presentation, will show this feature to you as well. But it's a very neat feature on how we exactly track and locate and post our photos, so people know how particular areas look like. Randy, are you done with your assessment?
Yeah, I believe that. Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. So now I want to, thanks Randy. So now I want to go to the 2014 year in our statistical assessment. We are going to be talking a little bit first about our acres model, and then our yield model, and then the result, the first results for this season that come out of these two models. Ken, are you there? Can you talk a little bit about the acres model?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, so what we do for the acreage assessment, and our final acre numbers will come out at the end of July after we've had an opportunity to have a more developed crop and some of these drown out areas reveal themselves a little better, and we're able to download and process the higher resolution satellite imagery that I'll talk about a little bit more. those will be our final numbers. What we do for this acreage assessment is we combine May precipitation, which is shown to have a relationship to the planted acres, nighttime surface temperature for typically cropped acreage, and then the vegetation index, which is still maturing. There's still a lot of bare soil showing through. And then we analyze it based on zones, agro-eco zones, because what's growing vibrantly in southern Illinois, which would be corn, is not growing as vibrantly in central Minnesota. So we kind of break those into different zones to give a better analysis for each zone. It is a geospatial analysis, so we enter information into an algorithm that's ran through geospatial software in each section of the ground. The vegetation index is on 16-acre sections, and the nighttime surface temperature is on 64-acre sections of ground. And then we establish parameters. What we're basically looking for at this time of year is just a rate of change. How much has the vegetation vigor changed? How much has the nighttime surface temperature changed? And what is the relationship between that and planted acreage and corn? So maybe the next slide, Stefan.
Hold on. Yeah, should be coming up shortly here.
And so here's just an example of what would be the higher resolution satellite imagery that we'll use for our July assessment. And in this situation, we're looking at some of the ponding and some of the flooding that has been presented of concern for this year. And you can see here's a June 19th image, here's a mid-May image, and you can see the dark areas in the image are where there's standing water. And there was some minor flooding along the Kaskaskia earlier this year, which we were able to capture in the imagery. We'll also show some image that was just collected yesterday that shows some of the flooding around Davenport that people have been concerned about. So maybe move on to the next slide, Stefan.
Yeah, so that was a little bit of an overview of the our acreage model, right? Satellite-derived acreage model using NDVI and in a regression. And now I want to go over to the yield model. Jonathan, do you want to give an overview of that?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So we've updated our 2014 yield model. You can see on the left-hand side a list of the new features, on the right-hand side a list of the new benefits. So we have updated our regression equations from a year ago. We're seeing 80 to 90% county level yield accuracy in many of the major counties by the time the model gets to the first week of August. So we do expect that over the next 6 weeks, as we release forecasts each 2 weeks, this accuracy is going to climb and climb towards that, which we consider to be a very good and actionable number at the county level. We are forecasting future inputs actively, and so really our model is based on the same variables you would expect, and the same variables that most models include: soil fertility, precipitation, soil moisture, degree days. We get a leaf area index, we get a photovoltaic index, we get NDVI data. Again, we have that satellite advantage of several factors that the satellites can give us empirical data on. Also day and night temperatures. So what we're doing this year is using the 10-year history as a guide for those future variables. At the moment, we have year-to-date precipitation, we have soil moisture, and we have degree days. So we have 3 variables that are driving today's forecasts. So the model is driven a lot by history and a lot by that field scouting and that fundamental analysis that Randy went through earlier, which again looks excellent. Our database, again being 10 years rather than 6, is now 2/3 larger. We're updating the model every 2 weeks. This is going to help everyone on the call kind of stay closer to what's happening, and even this week we're kind of seeing things change as some of that satellite data comes in. We're modeling ag zones, and so now that's a reporting characteristic. It's something you can slice and dice by, and it did help the regression equations to use that kind of approach. At the same time, if it's better to predict the state creating its own equation, we've created unique equations for Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana that perform better than the ag zone would for those particular states. So we're not afraid to take the best approach and continue to push towards the best forecast at the county level. We have FIP codes in the data, so if you have your own data sets, it's very quick to link them up. We have the soil fertility index. That's something we did not have a year ago. It's now incorporated. Growing degree days, and then, like I said, leaf area index and the fraction of photosynthetic activity, which we get by satellite. So these are some of the new things. In terms of the overall national picture, we do see the potential for a record year. So at the moment, we have a yield of 164.6. We're losing one significant figure in the chart there, but on the far right is our 2014 yield number at the moment. So the potential is there. We're not seeing any major red flags. Conditions are very, very favorable in many key states, and so we're certainly in the neighborhood to perhaps set a new yield record, and we'll know more as the summer wears on. On the bottom part, we're going to show you the bushels there, and so even this number has changed slightly in the last 24 hours. So you see on the bottom right there, 13.9 billion bushels for 2014. Based on satellite data that we got in the last 24 hours, we believe there's a few more acres that have been planted than we thought a week ago. And so this is new data, and so this number is actually bumping to 14.1 billion bushels nationally. And so it's actually tipping a bit higher just in the last day as we got that data set. So 14.1 billion is the number to look for. Here is Iowa, of course, the biggest state and certainly a bellwether for corn nationally. Iowa certainly has the potential at the moment to have a record year in terms of yield as well as a record year in terms of bushels. We've kind of found a very sweet spot, and the fundamental analysis supports it. You saw the charts and the slides earlier, as well as Randy's comments about just this is a very good time, and it's better than a year ago. So just fundamentally very, very strong year shaping up. But a lot of the season still to come. So if I was a betting man, there may be a little more downside than upside, but very, very strong fundamentals in Iowa. Next table, thank you, Stefan, is all of the states. We've split it into two slides, but this gives you a little bit of context for kind of how states planted a year ago, what the USDA has put out as of the end of March, where LandViewer is right this moment. And so again, even some of this data is just coming in the last 24 hours and getting into these slides. But you can go through there. You can see many states are at least at their 10-year average yields. A number of states are in the ballpark of having record years or pushing near the high side of their 10-year history in terms of yields. So I don't want to go through all of them, but they are all there, and I believe everyone on the call is going to get a copy of the slides. So those will get distributed. So we do see about 1.3 million acres that can be planted and that are actively in production beyond what the USDA put out. And again, their prediction was made about 90 days ago is when they were crunching their numbers. So a lot changes in 90 days, and I think a lot's going to change in the next 90 days. But we do have that satellite advantage with getting the acres, with getting our vegetation readings, with getting temperatures, as well as several other variables. So we see about another 1.3 million acres being planted we see about another 200 million bushels that can come out of there. And so again, as you see on the bottom right, we have a harvest acres forecast of 85.78 million acres. We have a bushels forecast of 14.11. We have a yield forecast of 164.6. And what we try to do is create balanced forecasts where there is kind of equal upside and downside. We're going to do our best to keep the numbers balanced, and that's the picture at the moment. So back to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Sure.
Thank you. So again, I think we're seeing strong yields and good supply this year. Ken, you want to go over these sort of regionalized maps where we go over about 1,400 counties that we're actively tracking?
Sure. Yeah. So here's the county breakout, and you can see that there's typically a slight increase in the Midwestern states. A lot of the decline is the southern states that moved to corn in the past and have appear to be moving back away. The Dakotas seem to have had a decline, and clearly we'll our July acreage forecast is the one that we hang our hats on, and that'll be the one that gives us a little more detail at this resolution, but this is where we're at right now. So here's looking at the change in yield from a 5-year average yield, and again, we're seeing some very high yield increases in a lot of the states that also produce a lot of corn. The yield declines also seem to be in some areas where we have reduced acreage. The Dakotas, Minnesota, where Randy's already kind of covered some of the issues there. The Dakotas have had some very wet and some cooler days that are probably restricting yield for those areas.
Yeah, but we should mention we don't quite see at this point that dramatic drop in conditions in the Dakotas that USDA would predict their planted acre decisions. We see a little bit more acreage than USDA does in that area. So at this point, I want to really encourage everybody that is on the phone to after this call, go to our website, the LandViewer website, and play around a little bit with it. Register. If you register, you get actually access to 7,000 elevator price points, corn cash prices, as well as the basis prices that's updated daily. And we spent a lot of effort updating that website. I want to walk you through this a little bit, but please use this link, go to the website, register, and then after registration, you get approved, and then go to Maps and Analytics. Click on Maps and Analytics, and then I will show you how you can select the prices in a little bit. But first of all, I should say we have a couple more slides to go. Ken, you want to go over this longer-term forecast here from Genscape?
Yeah, sure. So at Genscape, we have a team of meteorologists that forecast weather for the power market. And so their focus and their training has been on long-term forecasts. And while we recognize the potential error with long-term forecasts, we also feel strongly that this is certainly better than just a guess. And if we were to look at these forecasts, they really maintain the idea that we're going to be seeing a good yield this year. The only cautions would be if there's going to be too much rain in the Minnesota and the Dakotas, and whether the temperature is going to prohibit growth in these same areas on into Iowa and Illinois. Of course, if we see like we did see last year where we have this extended fall, then those temperatures won't be a problem. And of course, if we see these nice lower temperatures at silking, that's often a benefit to yield. So Certainly, the long-term weather forecast is going along with what we've been seeing thus far this year with the positive forecast for yield. And something else we've been putting out, we provide our clients, for those of you on the call that are currently not clients, we provide our clients with a weekly report that includes the reports from the crop consultants and several other maps that we offer. One of the maps we offer is the stage for different river gauges in the United States that the National Weather Service provides. And there have been a lot of reports of flooding recently. This was collected yesterday. This is a forecast of potential flooding. And we can see that along the Mississippi, there's some tributaries that may be reaching major flood stage. So, Stephen, maybe you can go to the next picture. So again, one of the things that we're looking at is the high resolution satellite imagery and whether it's showing indications of this flooding. And this is just an example. This certainly isn't indicative of the entire Midwest or the entire area along the Mississippi River. We recognize there's some flooding and ponding that's occurred in Minnesota and northern Iowa that would be more clear than this. But here's just a scenario where the NWS river gauge indicated that there's a major flood, but looking at the satellite imagery, you can see again the dark blue, black areas are where there's standing water, and we can see that the water has gone outside of the river channel for a small river that flows into the Mississippi, but we're not seeing that it's reached out into the fields yet. So this image would indicate that the flooding so far hasn't been significant in this area. For our July forecast, we'll be collecting these for all of our client draw areas and doing a more detailed assessment of planted acres and feeding this information as well as ground truth information into our model for yield.
Thank you, Ken. So as I told you, we have substantially updated our website and gone to this sort of tool viewer layout that we actually got patented as a technology, and where we can, on this particular screenshot on the left-hand side, you can see all of our crop, our corn cash prices. Where corn is more expensive, they are colored in red, and where corn is relatively cheap, they're colored in green. So you can, for example, correlate, you have, for example, less vegetation vigor, which would be the redder dots, right? Moderate decline to severe decline in vegetation over the last 5 years, right, which could indicate some yield problems. You can see here in this case that on the left-hand side, it actually correlates with some red flagged corn prices, right, which could be indicative that less corn availability is increasing prices in this area to some degree. And then you can correlate it on the right-hand side with some weather data. In this case, precipitation changed over the last 30 days, and so you can see relatively high precipitation in that area as well. I want to see if I can exit the presentation and go to the website live. Flip over to, so this is the LandViewer webpage. I hope you can see it. So these are all, each dot here is a elevator or ethanol plant, corn purchaser, putting out a price report, and you can see again up in the Dakotas, right, the less expensive corn is flagged in green, more expensive corn is in red. As we zoom into these maps, you can you can see more the vegetation vigor which we have overlaid. And by the way, you can select all these layers from here, right? So we've clicked on vegetation vigor, and down there we clicked on basis price, right? And on the right-hand side, we've clicked on precipitation. So as we overlay that and we zoom in, for example, into certain areas, Kansas City, and we can go a little bit further east, we can pull up the vegetation vigor, and we can see, that there's some potential problem areas here. It's all redder here. We have solid green, solid growth of corn emerging. That's only corn, right? We go through great lengths to just display our corn mask. But you can see here really problem areas, areas here you can see how there's relatively higher corn prices, less currently prevailing vegetation. And then you can, over here, for example, you could select the weather maps and establish some correlations as to why prices move a certain way or not. But again, this is an early indication, right? Because USDA has not released any data yet, certainly not on a regional and certainly not on a sub-regional level, for you to see whether, corn purchase opportunities in the area. So that is our website. You can certainly also select, for example, growing degree stages here. You can overlay and you can see growing degree days. You can see how this vary across the area, or that's temperature. So temperature from the 10-year average, you can select that. You can put in corn growth stages. You can overlay the corn growth stages, and in the legend you see the definitions for the colors, how many leaves have emerged, etc. And then so you can see obviously how this corn growth stages now move up from the south. So again, I would really encourage you to register, go to the website. That's a lot of information on there for you to explore. Another thing I promised to people is that we'll make this link available to the corn crop tour, and where we post the imagery as we go around the country, and then you can click on these individual points, and it'll bring up the picture for these individual locations. So I'll do this picture here, and you can see all the pictures that are taken at particular locations pop up and are linked to this dot. So this is how we will keep track of our crop scouting, organize our crop scouting, identify problem points, identify disease pressures down the road that we see in fields, drowned out spots in the field, and we will all log it here for people to access and double check if they want to. So this basically concludes our webinar. I want to see if there's any questions. I do not see any questions at this point. Going forward, we have had a series of individual calls with our clients, giving them the acreage information. And going forward, we'll be updating the acreage information and the yield information for our clients on a biweekly basis. And we will be hosting another national call probably in around four weeks, close to the USDA release of 2014 yield numbers. If there's any other questions or any other comments, then I think I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.